Hello and welcome. Today we're diving into a book that, I'm not kidding, can genuinely change how you see the world. It's called Nonviolent Communication by Dr. Marshall Rosenberg. It gives us a framework that can transform not just how you talk, but how you connect with others, and maybe even more importantly, with yourself. So let's explore how we can start building some windows instead of walls in our own lives.
I mean, really think about that for a second. You offer what you think is just helpful advice, and boom, the other person gets super defensive. Or you try to explain that you're feeling hurt, and somehow you're suddenly in a full-blown argument. It's an incredibly common and, let's be honest, a deeply frustrating experience for just about all of us.
And right at the heart of those moments is this core feeling, isn't it? That we're just not being heard, that nobody really gets what we're trying to say. If that sounds even a little bit familiar, stick with me, because what we're talking about today offers a clear, practical way to change that pattern for good. Okay, so first, let's tackle the big question. Why does this keep happening? Why do our conversations, even with the people we love, so often turn into conflicts? Well, Dr. Rosenberg suggests the problem isn't some flaw in us. Nope. It's a flaw in the language we've all been taught to use. A language that, without us even realizing it, is filled with hidden violence. He gives it a name: life-alienating communication. Now that sounds a bit academic, but it's really just a way of speaking that's built on judging, blaming, and diagnosing other people. We're trained from day one to think in terms of who's right and who's wrong, and our words totally reflect that. This kind of language immediately puts people on the defensive, you know? It disconnects us from our natural compassion and basically pits us against each other, even when that's the last thing we want.
And this stuff shows up in a few common ways that we all recognize. First, there are moralistic judgments, calling someone lazy or selfish. Then we fall into the trap of making comparisons, which is just a surefire way to make everyone feel miserable. We also do this denial of responsibility thing with phrases like, "I had to," which totally hides our own choice in the matter. And finally, we frame our desires as demands, which always carries this unspoken threat if they're not met.
This slide right here shows the core shift NVC asks us to make. It's subtle, but it's so powerful. Instead of stating a judgment like it's a fact, "You are too generous," we separate what we see from what we think. When I see you give away your lunch money, I think you're being too generous. See the difference? The first one just invites an argument. The second one, though, that invites a conversation because you're owning your interpretation, not stating it as some absolute truth. So, if our old way of speaking is all about judgment, nonviolent communication, or NVC, is all about connection. And it's not just a set of tricks or techniques. Dr. Rosenberg talks about it as a fundamental shift in our consciousness, where our goal is to focus on the shared humanity in ourselves and in others, even when we're in the middle of a conflict. This quote from the philosopher J. Krishnamurti was a huge inspiration for NVC, and wow, it really nails the absolute foundation of this whole practice. For most of us, making observations that are completely free of judgment or analysis is incredibly difficult, but it's the first and most crucial step toward any real understanding.
So how do we actually do this? Well, it all comes down to this 4-step framework, which basically acts like a translator for our inner world. First, you observe the facts, just like a video camera would. When I see soiled socks under the coffee table. Second, you state your feeling. I feel irritated. Third, and this is key, you identify the universal human need behind that feeling, because I have a need for more order in the rooms we share. And fourth, you make a clear, positive request. Would you be willing to put your socks in your room? Simple, right? Direct and totally free of blame.
Okay, that might sound straightforward enough on paper, but what does it actually look like in the real world, especially when emotions are running high? Let's look at how this simple framework can completely transform real-life conflicts. Let's start with a classic, a scenario that happens in relationships all the time. One partner feels like they are just talking to a brick wall, and that frustration builds and builds and builds until they finally burst out with, "You never listen to me." Now, the usual response is to get defensive, right? "Yes, I do." And bam, the fight is on. But what if the other partner used NVC to listen? Instead of defending, they guessed the feeling and the need. It sounds like you're terribly frustrated because you would like to feel more connection when we speak. In the actual story from the book, the wife was moved to tears. Why? Because for the first time, she felt truly, deeply understood. That is the power of listening for the need, not the attack. Okay, let's look at a much higher stakes example. Picture this. Rosenberg is giving a presentation in a mosque at a refugee camp. He's an American, and you can imagine, tensions are extremely high. Suddenly, a man in the audience just leaps to his feet and screams at him.
The words he screams are murderer, assassin, child killer. And then dozens of other voices immediately join in. Just think about that for a second. How would you respond? Most of us would either freeze up, try to defend ourselves, or get angry. But Rosenberg did something completely different.
He listened for the need behind the words. He'd seen American-made tear gas canisters on his way in, so he guessed the man's pain wasn't really about him personally, but about the policies causing so much suffering. So he asked, "Are you angry because you would like my government to use its resources differently?" The man, totally shocked to actually be heard, yelled back, "Yes, that's right," and then just began pouring out his pain. That one empathic guess turned a violent confrontation into a moment of human connection. It's incredible.
So far, we focused on using NVC with other people. But Rosenberg argues that its most crucial application might just be in how we treat ourselves. Because think about it. If we are internally violent towards ourselves, it's pretty much impossible to be genuinely compassionate with anyone else.
We all have that inner critic, right? That voice that just loves to say, "That was so dumb," or "You always mess things up." Well, NVC invites us to replace that harsh voice with one of compassionate curiosity. When you make a mistake, instead of attacking yourself, you can ask, "What unmet need of mine was I trying to meet with that action?"
And the result of this shift is, it's profound. Self-judgment just leads to shame and guilt, which are paralyzing. But when we look for the unmet need behind our actions, we shift into a state of mourning and learning. We can see, I was trying to meet my need for rest, but the way I did it didn't really serve me. This understanding lets us forgive ourselves and find better strategies for the future, all without that heavy baggage of self-hatred.
Ultimately, this all comes down to a really powerful metaphor that Rosenberg uses. Every time we speak, every time we listen, we face a choice. We can use words that build walls of judgment, blame, and misunderstanding. Or we can use words that create windows into each other's humanity, built on observation, feelings, needs, and requests. So I'll leave you with this question to think about. In your own life, with your family, your friends, your colleagues, or even in those quiet conversations you have with yourself, what walls have you built? And how might you begin, just one conversation at a time, to turn them into windows?